Hey, this is Tom Webster, and this is Sounds Profitable for Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. Celebrity podcasts, successes or Sussexes. I'm so proud of that headline, as difficult as it is to say. So this week, I'm going to look at some recent data on popular podcast genres that Pew put out, especially in light of Spotify parting ways with Meghan and Harry and their podcast Archetypes. What can we learn from the past about the future of celebrity podcasting? But first, this week on the Product Deep Dive, Chief Growth and Product Officer Amelia Coomber showcases how Podscribe's AI-powered platform can be used for planning and competitive intelligence, tracking everything from the top advertisers on a given podcast to the location of each ad read in individual episodes. Tune in now on soundsprofitable.com. Well, before we get started, some housekeeping. Clean your house. Also, starting today, the weekly Sounds Profitable podcast and newsletter are moving to Wednesday. That's today, for some of you, which lets our team properly observe our numerous Monday holidays like Juneteenth, which we just observed, and also enjoy their weekends without being harangued about newsletter drafts. So I hope that's okay. Anyway, on with the show. Last week, Spotify ended its relationship with Meghan and Harry, prompting another one of Spotify's hosts, Bill Simmons, who runs The Ringer, to call the Sussexes grifters and a few other uncomplimentary things. And I'm going to read you a quote from Bill Simmons. What does he do? It's one of those things where it's like, what's your talent? Why are we listening to you? So you were born in a royal family and then you left? You live in effing Montecito and you sell documentaries and podcasts and nobody cares what you have to say about anything unless you talk about the royal family and you just complain about them. Now, ironically, Bill Simmons is not only the head of The Ringer, but also Spotify's head of podcast innovation. Anyway, of all the things the press and pundits have had to say about this particular venture, I do think Bill hit it on the head by asking, what's your talent? What does this high-profile failure, and indeed the failures of some other celebrity podcasts, have to say about putting famous people behind the mic? What can past performance tell us about the success of such efforts in the future? Well, we need to make a grand detour before I can get there. So first, I want to revisit a topic that I looked at a few weeks ago in this podcast and our newsletter, which sparked a little debate. It was an article that I wrote called How to Murder a Podcast last April, and I took a look at some data from Edison Research that was characterized as the batting average of popular podcasts by genre. And my issue wasn't with the veracity of the data. I'm fairly confident that a higher percentage of true crime podcasts make it to the top of the charts than, say, religion podcasts. My issue, as I hope was clear at the time, was in the interpretation and characterization of these results, and my concern that they would just lead to a glut of more true crime shows rather than the content innovation that podcasting so desperately needs. And need it we do, my friends. A couple of weeks ago, my friend Dan Meisner and I shared the stage at Radio Days North America in Toronto to dish out the truth about podcasting. And certainly one of those truths is a growing tension about content. People who are longtime fans of the medium are always looking for new podcasts, and there are plenty in the hopper. That's not the issue. The problem exists for the people who just finished Serial and are looking for the next Serial. Serial was 10 years ago. Now, I think about this when I see data like the data that Pew put out this week on the genres of the top-ranking podcasts. And they took the top 300 shows in Apple and the top 300 shows in Spotify. There's some overlap, so it's about a top 451. And fully 24% of those are true crime podcasts, far and away the number one in terms of the top charts. And in fact, very far ahead of number two, which was politics and government at 10% compared to true crime's 24%. Now, at first blush, this would appear to support the notion that supporting a true crime podcast gives you the best chance to succeed. But I ask you, to take a more critical look at this data. The number one most listened to genre of podcast among all podcast listeners in Edison podcast metrics, quarter after quarter, is comedy. But in Pew's analysis of the top 451 podcasts in the Apple and Spotify charts, true crime is 12 times more likely to be listed in the top charts than comedy. Now, does that mean that true crime is inherently more popular than comedy? Or does it merely mean that the popularity of true crime is spread out over fewer great podcasts than the popularity of comedy? Well, the latter is demonstrably true. Depending on which source you consult, there are 10 to 20 times more comedy podcasts than true crime shows. True crime has a handful of obvious gateway podcasts, and then a comparatively small number of high-quality shows of the same genre. The question I always ask myself when I look at data like this is the following. Does the system dictate the inventory, or does the inventory dictate the system? With podcasting still not a weekly habit for 2/3 of Americans, I think it's dangerous to look at the inventory, in this case, the current top charts, and derive a system, i.e. sports podcasts are more likely to succeed than music podcasts. It's that kind of inductive reasoning that can stifle potential content innovation. We don't need more true crime podcasts. What we need are more serials in other genres. Now, you can look at the data that Pew put out and data like that and tell yourself that the key to growing podcasting is to make the next serial, or you can look at it as I choose. You can look at that chart and realize that we haven't yet made the serial of education or the serial of science and technology. We haven't made a better broad concept gateway podcast to comedy than the polarizing Joe Rogan Experience. We haven't made the must-listen personal finance podcast for Gen Z. And we haven't even scratched the surface of what should be in the top 5, music. Similarly, it would be dangerous to make assumptions about future celebrity podcasts based upon the performance of past efforts. There have certainly been some high-profile stabs. Some, like Smartless, have been successful. Others, like Spotify's recent lark with the Sussexes, not so much. I think it's tempting to look at the latter as a failure of the celebrity podcast. But Smartless is every bit as celebrity-driven as Archetypes was, right? The problem with Archetypes wasn't a celebrity problem. It was a content innovation problem. It was just another interview show, and there's no evidence that Meghan Markle is good at interviewing. I'm not of the opinion that celebrities are ruining podcasting. That's an inventory dictates the system conclusion based on insufficient examples. I am of the opinion that there's nothing about being a celebrity that makes you a good interviewer. Dax Shepard is a great interviewer. Drew Barrymore is fantastic. But for every Dax and Drew, there are 10 more celebrities attempting the interview game that are just not up to snuff. I think we need more celebrities in podcasting. I think having celebrities from popular movies and TV shows doing podcasts is one of the best ways that we can attract non-listeners to the medium. It works, and we know it works. But we need to have those celebrities do more than interview shows. We need to lean on their familiarity as a foundation to take risks and not do the same old talk show. I know I've talked before in this space about my days as a rhetoric instructor at Penn State years ago and the foundational concept of the known new contract. If you start your listener, reader, or viewer on known familiar ground, you provide a safe foundation to introduce something new that they'll be more receptive to. With a celebrity or a known commodity as a host, a podcast can do all sorts of wild things, and the audience will give it a shot. Television already does a great job with this. That's why so many of us watched Stanley Tucci do a cooking show. My family recently powered through Parks and Recreation for the first time, and when it ended, we experienced a genuine sadness at the loss of Leslie Knope and Ron Swanson and the other characters with whom we fell in love over these past few months. Do people want an audio version of that show? I doubt it. It would be a pale imitation. And an interview show with Nick Offerman might work, but it would also be more celebrities interviewing celebrities, and that is not exactly going to set the world on fire. But Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman, the stars of Park and Recreation, did get the two preteen boys in our family who have zero interest in crafting to watch 3 full seasons of their crafting series, Making It. And that is the very epitome of the known new contract. I doubt I could get them to listen to the Ben Schwartz show if it existed. But Schwartz's character, Jean-Ralphio, I think we'd all listen to a relationship advice show that had Jean-Ralphio pretty religiously. I think it's so important for us to understand that podcasting is far from a mature medium and that what got us here is not going to get us to the next 100 million listeners. We can't look at the existing inventory and derive a system of rules for this game. Not yet. This is a medium that I believe is still capable of taking big swings at a vast blue ocean of people that haven't yet made podcasts a part of their life. I don't think the Sussexes were particularly successful at that, but it would be wrong to throw out the concept of celebrity podcasts simply because a few high-profile examples didn't actually produce good shows. Instead, let's find ways to take known commodities and create new worlds with them. The failure, then, is not the celebrity podcast. It's the lack of innovative celebrity podcasts. And here's why I wanted to revisit this. Next week, Sounds Profitable will release our latest quarterly research study, The Podcast Opportunity, Buyer Perceptions of Podcast Advertising, and you can sign up for the free webinar in the show notes. I'm really excited about this one, and I can guarantee you that one of the key findings is indeed going to revolve around the tension between buyers wanting new shows and exciting new ideas with their reluctance to take risks on unfamiliar shows in a period of economic uncertainty. How do we create exciting new forms of podcast content when the safe money continues to flow to a comparatively small number of existing hits? I think the key is that we use celebrity as a gateway, but we cannot waste the gift of a celebrity on doing the same old thing. The known gives us the opportunity to pursue the new, something exciting for both buyers and listeners. We can learn some life lessons from the Sussexes, yes, but not about podcasting. I'm Tom Webster. Thanks again for listening to my newsletter and podcast today, Celebrity Podcasts, Successes or Sussexes. This episode was built using Spooler and hosted on Art19. And again, I'm Tom Webster. Join us next week for the next issue episode, Grand Show of the Sounds Profitable podcast. Cheers.